Why did the room go quiet the moment she entered? Not respectful quiet, not curiosity, the kind that settles when people decide someone doesn't belong. She felt it before she saw it, shoulders stiffening, eyes sliding past her, conversations lowering just enough to exclude. Lara Vance stood against the wall, spine straight, hands folded in front of her like she was already on trial. The scar across her throat pulled tight in the dry air of the briefing room, a reminder she never needed. She couldn't speak. Everyone here knew that. Everyone here had already decided what it meant. The map glowed on the screen, targets, timings, confidence. Lieutenant Kalen spoke with the calm certainty of a man used to being heard. He didn't look at her when he mentioned the attached sniper asset. He didn't say her name, just the role, as if she were equipment, replaceable, optional. She typed. The synthetic voice from her vest filled the room flat, emotionless. "I can hear you." A few men shifted. Uncomfortable, someone smirked. Kalen crossed his arms. "Hearing isn't the problem, speaking is. If comms go down, you don't shoot, you wait, clear." The words landed heavier than gunfire ever had. Lara nodded once, clear. Inside, something burned, not anger, not pride, something quieter, determination sharpened by years of being underestimated. She had learned long ago that arguing wasted oxygen. Bullets didn't. The helicopter ride-in was loud, violent, alive. Rotor wash hammered the night air. Green light washed over faces that trusted radios more than instincts. Lara watched signal bars flicker on her tablet. 4, 3, 2. No one noticed. No one looked at her. By the time the helicopter banked toward the valley, the signal was gone. Silence had begun. She dropped first onto the ridge, boots biting shale, body absorbing impact like memory. Alone, above, watching. The team moved below her like ghosts, efficient, lethal, confident. She saw what they didn't. Shapes where there shouldn't be shapes. Stillness pretending to be stone. She tried to warn them, typed fast, sent, failed, tried again, failed. She clicked the radio once, twice. "Cut the clicks," Kalen snapped. "Maintain discipline." They were walking into it. Her finger hovered on the trigger. Orders said don't shoot. Training said wait. Experience said 6 men were about to die. She aimed not at the enemy, but at the ground. The rifle cracked. The valley answered. Water exploded from a rusted tank. The team scattered, startled, angry, alive. "What the hell was that?" Kalen shouted. She reloaded, clicked twice. "She's compromised," someone yelled. But then a second round hit the dirt in front of Kalen's boots, a line drawn in stone and dust. "She's pointing," Miller said quietly. The ambush sprang seconds later. Chaos swallowed the valley. RPGs screamed. Machine guns roared. Lara saw angles, exits closing, traps unfolding. She fired not to kill but to block, not to attack but to guide. Every bullet was a word she couldn't speak. They called her hostile. The word hurt more than the shrapnel ever had. When the retreat path became a minefield, she shot the ground again, closer this time. A warning disguised as aggression. When they almost ran south into death, she brought the mountain down instead. Rockfall thundered. Paths vanished. Lives remained. They hated her for it. Good, she thought, hate me just live. The courtyard exploded. Traps chained together like planned cruelty. She watched bodies vanish in dust and fire, her chest tight with helplessness. The machine gun pinned them. She tried to kill it. Geometry refused, so she killed its shelter instead. The mountain listened. When the bunker collapsed, silence followed, the kind that makes you realize you're still breathing. Below, they stared at the rubble where death had been. "That wasn't random," Miller whispered. Kalen didn't answer. He was counting patterns now, remembering the shots, the timing, the restraint. Understanding came too late to apologize, but not too late to act. When they almost fled into a cemetery seeded with explosives, Lara fired again. Dirt erupted at a man's feet. Stone shattered inches from his hand. Panic surged, then fire. Mines detonated where they would have walked. She hadn't missed. She blocked the door, Kalen said softly. The valley answered with gunfire. Enemy snipers rose on distant ridges. Lara fired first. Her shot killed one, but another round struck Miller almost simultaneously. Blood, screams, confusion. She hit him, someone yelled. The trust shattered again. They turned their weapons on the ridge. Lara ran under friendly fire, heart pounding, lungs burning, dragging steel and guilt through stone. She didn't fight back. She couldn't. She just moved because stopping meant dying and dying meant leaving them blind. From her new position she saw what they didn't, a mortar team setting up above the slot canyon they'd fled into. A perfect kill. One shot, impossible angle. She aimed for the wall instead. The explosion turned night into fire. Below, Kalen stared at the ruined rooftop, understanding finally cutting through pride and fear. She saved us, he said, all of it. A click broke through the static. Aura, he whispered, forgetting rank. Click. They moved for her immediately. Too late. She had one round left when she saw the heavy machine gun waiting to slaughter them in the wash. She stood up, fully exposed, and fired. The weapon shattered. The ambush died with it. Bullets answered. She fell. When they reached her, she was alive, bleeding, broken, stubbornly conscious. Kalen knelt beside her, hands shaking as he cut away her armor. I'm sorry, he said. The words mattered now. She looked at him, exhausted, silent, unbroken. Back at base, no one mocked the silence anymore. They listened to it. Weeks later, Kalen would tell the story, not as a hero's tale, but as a confession, about how the loudest voice in the valley wasn't the one barking orders. It was the one that trusted action over recognition, precision over pride, sacrifice over ego. Lara never corrected him. She didn't need to. Some people speak with commands. Some speak with courage. And sometimes, dignity doesn't speak at all. It simply acts. Why did her finger hesitate on the trigger when every instinct screamed to fire? Lara lay flat against the cold stone of the ridge, heart beating slow, controlled, the way it only did when the world narrowed to breath and distance. Below her, the valley breathed back, quiet, too quiet. She had learned to fear that kind of silence more than gunfire. Silence meant preparation. Silence meant someone else was deciding when you would die. The team moved again, shadows sliding through the wadi like they belonged there. They trusted the dark. They trusted their radios. Lara trusted gravity, wind, and what people did when they thought no one was watching. She scanned left. Nothing. Right. Heat signatures bloomed faintly near a cluster of low buildings, too steady, too deliberate to be civilians. She adjusted her scope, the scar on her throat tightening as if her body remembered something her mind tried to forget. She typed fast. Movement west structures, possible secondary element. Send. Failed. Her jaw clenched. She tapped again. Harder this time, like pressure alone could force the signal through rock and distance. Nothing. Below, Kalen raised his fist. The team froze. He crouched, listening, reading the terrain the way he'd been trained. Lara almost smiled. Almost. He was good. Just not good enough to see what she saw. A figure shifted behind a wall. Another behind a doorway. Weapons angled low, patient, waiting for the team to pass to expose their backs. A textbook L-shaped ambush. Lara pressed the radio. One click, two. Vance, Kalen said sharply. I said maintain radio discipline. She swallowed. The old frustration surged, not loud, not explosive. Heavy. Familiar. The kind that sat in your chest and reminded you that no matter how skilled you were, people judged you by what you lacked, not what you brought. She lifted the rifle, adjusted her elevation. Not at the fighters, not yet. She aimed at a stack of oil drums, 30 meters behind the SEAL's path. The shot cracked. Metal screamed as the round tore through steel. Diesel erupted, spraying black liquid across stone. Contact rear, someone shouted instinctively. The team pivoted, weapons snapping toward the noise. They spread, disciplined, alert. The fighters behind the wall hesitated just a second too long. That second saved lives. Lara fired again, this time into the dirt beside the hidden gunman's cover. Not close enough to kill, close enough to be unmistakable. Gunfire erupted, but not where it had been planned. The ambush collapsed into chaos. "What the hell is she doing?" Kalen barked over the net. Lara worked the bolt smoothly, breath steady, mind strangely calm. She wasn't reacting anymore. She was composing, every shot a sentence, every impact a punctuation mark. When the last hostile heat signature vanished into the buildings, the valley went quiet again, this time the good kind. The kind earned. The team regrouped, weapons still high. "She fired behind us," one operator said, "but not at us." Miller looked up toward the ridge. He couldn't see her, but he felt it now, the presence. The way Overwatch was supposed to feel, protective, unseen. "Maybe she saw something," he said. Kalen didn't answer. His jaw was tight, pride and doubt wrestling behind his eyes. They pushed forward. Minutes stretched. Lara's legs went numb from stillness. She didn't move. She waited. She always waited. Waiting had been drilled into her long before the explosion in Aleppo, before the hospital, before the surgeon had shaken his head and said the damage was permanent. Permanent was a word she hated. A faint metallic clink echoed up the canyon. Lara froze. She knew that sound. Tripwire. Her scope snapped to the left. A barely visible line shimmered between two rocks, angled perfectly at ankle height. Beyond it, buried shallow under dirt, the round shape of an old artillery shell slept patiently. The lead seal was 3 steps away. She didn't think. She fired. The bullet struck the rock just before the wire, showering sparks and stone. The man recoiled instinctively, stumbling backward. "What the?" The mine detonated where it lay, the blast throwing dust and fire into the air. The shockwave hit Lara a heartbeat later, thudding through her chest. She didn't flinch. Down below, the team stared at the smoking crater. "That would have been us," someone whispered. No one spoke for several seconds. Kalen slowly turned, looking up toward the ridge again. This time his weapon wasn't raised. "Sniper," he said, voice lower. "Do you have eyes on additional threats?" Lara pressed the radio. Click. Click. A pause. "Copy," Kalen said quietly. "We'll trust your calls." The words hit her harder than any apology could have. Trust. It had been a long time. They moved deeper into the valley toward the target compound. Lara tracked every rooftop, every window, every place a human could hide their fear behind a weapon. Her shoulders ached. Her fingers were stiff. She welcomed it. Pain meant she was still useful. Then everything went wrong. The explosion came from beneath them, not ahead, not behind. Under. A controlled blast that shattered stone and certainty at the same time. The courtyard wall folded inward, dumping men into dust and fire. Lara lost visual for half a second. Half a second was an eternity. When the smoke cleared, bodies lay twisted where plans had been. One man screamed. Another didn't move at all. Machine gun fire erupted from an elevated position, stitching the ground with brutal precision. The team scrambled, pinned, exposed. "Man down," Miller shouted. "We're pinned, north side heavy gun." Lara already had the bunker in her scope. She adjusted, fired. The round hit dirt inches too low. She fired again. Wood splintered, but the gun kept roaring. Her jaw tightened. The angle was wrong. The bunker was cut into the hill like a wound that refused to close. She could waste ammunition chasing perfection, or she could change the rules. Her gaze flicked upward. The hillside above the bunker sagged under the weight of stone and bad engineering. A support beam, old and cracked, held back gravity by habit alone. She dialed windage, ignored the tremor in her hands. Breathe in. Out. The rifle thundered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the mountain decided. Stone slid, timber snapped. The bunker vanished beneath tons of earth, the machine gun silenced forever. The valley exhaled. Down below, the SEAL stared at the collapse, stunned. "You see that?" someone breathed. "That was deliberate," Miller said. "That was surgical." Lara lowered her rifle slightly, chest rising and falling. Sweat stung her eyes. Her shoulders screamed. She didn't care. Then she saw the movement behind them. New heat signatures, closing fast. She fired again, not at them, but at the ground behind the team. A warning, a barrier. "Contact rear," a voice yelled. "Sniper firing again," another shouted. The old fear returned, sharp and fast. She kept shooting, bracketing, blocking, hurting them away from death they couldn't see. They cursed her for it. She accepted that too. When they almost ran north into a field seeded with explosives, she did the only thing left. She detonated the proof. The minefield erupted in fire and thunder, lighting the night like judgment. Silence followed, thick, heavy, undeniable. "She stopped us," Kalen said, voice barely audible. Lara sagged against the rock, breath shaking now. The adrenaline was fatting, leaving behind exhaustion and a familiar ache, not physical, emotional. The cost of always being right too late for gratitude. She checked her ammo. Not much left. The night wasn't done with them yet. And neither was she. Why did the gunfire suddenly feel closer than her own breathing? Lara realized it the moment the echoes stopped behaving. Sound in the valley had rules: bounce, delay, distortion. She had memorized them the way other people memorized prayers. But now the shots were wrong, too clean, too immediate. Someone had moved uphill. Someone had learned. She shifted her weight slowly, inch by inch, careful not to dislodge stone. Below her, the team regrouped amid smoke and fractured stone, adrenaline still riding high from survival. They didn't see the new danger yet. She did. A heat signature crept along the opposite ridge, low and disciplined. Not militia, not desperate locals with borrowed rifles. This was a hunter, someone trained to wait, someone patient enough to let others make noise first. Her throat tightened, not from fear but memory. She typed a warning, sent it. Nothing. She clicked the radio twice. Static answered. The hunter paused, scanning. Lara felt the weight of the moment settle into her bones. If she fired now, she'd reveal her position. If she waited, the shot would come from the other side and it wouldn't miss. Below, Miller knelt beside the wounded man, hands slick with blood, trying to slow time with pressure and hope. Lara didn't have time for either. She fired. The round snapped through the night, striking rock just inches from the enemy sniper's head. Not a kill shot, a message. The reply came instantly. The bullet smashed into the stone where her head had been a second earlier, spraying shards across her cheek. She rolled, heart hammering, breath sharp. The hunter was good, very good. Now it was a duel. She crawled to a new position, muscles burning, mind oddly calm. Fear narrowed into focus. She remembered this feeling from before the hospital, before the silence, when everything loud inside her had gone quiet and all that remained was clarity. She scanned, waited. The enemy fired again, trying to pin her to force movement. She stayed still, let the mountain take the hit. Down below, Kalen looked up sharply as stone chips rained down near his team. "We're being watched," he said. As if summoned, a second shot cracked closer this time. "Sniper!" someone yelled. Kalen's gaze snapped toward Lara's ridge. Understanding dawned, heavy and awful. "She's not firing at us," he said. "She's drawing him. The thought settled like a debt. Lara edged her rifle forward, breath slow. She saw it then, the faint shimmer of glass catching moonlight, the smallest mistake. She fired. The enemy sniper dropped, heat blooming and then fading. Silence returned, but it wasn't relief this time. It was anticipation. Because Lara knew one truth better than most. Skilled men rarely worked alone. Movement erupted to the east, 3 figures advancing fast, using the chaos as cover. Assault element. They had adapted, learned her language. Her ammo count dropped again, too fast. She tried the radio one more time. Click, click. Kalen responded immediately now. We hear you. We see your fire. Keep guiding. The words steadied her and scared her. Responsibility always did. She fired a tight group ahead of the advancing fighters, forcing them to ground. One flanked left. Smart. She tracked him, fired. Dirt exploded at his feet. He froze long enough for Miller's team to reposition and cut him down. Another tried to push straight through. Lara aimed center mass. This time she didn't miss. The body fell hard, lifeless, heat bleeding into the night. She exhaled slowly. Killing never felt heroic. It felt necessary, that was all. Then the radio crackled, with something worse than gunfire. Mortar team setting up, a voice shouted. High ground, West Ridge. Lara's blood ran cold. She swung her scope west and saw them, silhouettes assembling tubes with calm efficiency. The angle was perfect. The blast radius would trap the team in the wash with nowhere to run. She checked her ammo. 3 rounds. 3. She couldn't take them all. Her mind raced, angles, options, losses. She felt the familiar weight of choice pressed down, the kind that never left you clean. She aimed for the mortar tube. Fired. The round struck metal, bending it uselessly. 1 threat neutralized. 2 left. They scattered immediately, faster now, learning. She fired again, hitting the ground between them, forcing separation. The last round felt heavier in the chamber. Final words always did. She scanned the terrain and saw it, a fuel cache tucked against a rock face, hidden but not protected. Enough explosive potential to rewrite the fight. She stood up to get the angle. That's when they hit her. The round tore through her shoulder, spinning her sideways. Pain exploded, white and consuming. She hit the ground hard, breath knocked from her lungs, vision swimming. Her rifle clattered away. Below, Kalen saw her fall. No, he breathed. Lara gasped, fingers clawing at stone. Blood soaked into her sleeve, warm and fast. Her left arm screamed, useless now. The mortar team repositioned, faster than before. She dragged herself toward the rifle, every movement agony. Her fingers brushed metal. Another shot cracked close, too close. She rolled, barely avoiding it, and grabbed the rifle with her good hand, pulled it in, checked the chamber. 1 round left. 1. She pushed herself up onto one knee, swaying, vision narrowing. The world tunneled down to scope and breath and the distant shape of the fuel cache. She thought briefly of the hospital room, of the doctor's face, of the silence that had followed her everywhere since. She thought of how many times people had decided what she couldn't do. Her finger tightened. The rifle thundered. The explosion was immediate and overwhelming, fireball tearing through the ridge, consuming the mortar team in light and sound. The shockwave slammed into Lara, throwing her backward like a discarded thought. The mortars never fired. Down below, the team stared as the ridge erupted. She did that, Miller whispered. Kalen was already moving. Get to her now. Lara lay on her back, staring at the stars. They blurred together, soft and distant. Pain ebbed into something dull and heavy. Her chest rose unevenly. She was suddenly very tired. Footsteps reached her, frantic, human close. Hands pressed against her wound. Voices overlapped, urgent and afraid. "She's alive," someone said. "She's alive." Kalen knelt beside her, face pale. He tried to speak, failed, then tried again. "You saved us," he said finally, voice breaking. "All of us." Lara looked at him. Her vision was fading, edges darkening. She lifted her hand slightly and tapped his wrist once. A single click. Her eyes closed. And for the first time since the valley had gone quiet, no one mistook her silence for weakness. Why did the silence after the explosion feel heavier than the blast itself? Lara drifted in and out of awareness, suspended in a place where pain dulled into pressure and sound arrived late, as if the world was unsure whether she was still part of it. Voices came first, muffled, overlapping, urgent. Hands followed, strong, careful, afraid. "She's losing blood. Keep pressure there. Stay with us, Lara, stay." Hearing her name pulled her back harder than pain ever could. She opened her eyes to fractured light, headlamps cutting through dust, faces blurred by sweat and fear. Kalen was there, kneeling too close, his hands already soaked red. For a moment he forgot command presence, forgot rank. He looked like a man who had almost lost something he didn't know how to replace. She tried to lift her hand, failed. "It's okay," he said quickly, misreading the effort. "Don't move, you did enough." Enough, the word echoed strangely. There was always more she could have done, more angles to check, more risks to absorb, but her body was done arguing. The medevac took time, too much time. The valley didn't care that she was bleeding out, it still demanded vigilance. Miller's team formed a perimeter while the medic worked with grim efficiency, fingers steady even as the situation slipped toward the edge. Lara watched the stars again. They seemed closer now, calmer. She wondered if this was what people meant when they said things slowed down at the end. She didn't feel brave, she felt empty, spent. The helicopter finally arrived like a promise kept too late. Rotor washed toward the night, scattering dust and spent casings. Hands lifted her, straps tightened. The world tilted. As they loaded her aboard, Kalen leaned close so she could hear him over the noise. "I should have trusted you from the start," he said, not loud, not for anyone else. "I'm sorry." She met his eyes. There was no anger there, just understanding. She blinked once. It was enough. The flight out blurred into pain and light, and the sharp smell of antiseptic. She lost consciousness somewhere between the valley and the first incision. When she woke, the ceiling was white, too white, the kind of white that erased time. Machines hummed softly around her, keeping count of things her body had forgotten how to do on its own. Her throat burned. Instinctively, she tried to speak. Nothing came. Panic flared fast, irrational, suffocating. She clawed weakly at the sheets, heart rate spiking as the monitor complained for her. A nurse appeared instantly, calm hands grounding her. "You're safe," the woman said gently. "You're back, easy." Lara swallowed hard. The familiar absence settled in again, not new, not surprising, but still cruel. She reached for the tablet on the side table with trembling fingers. Typed, "Am I alive?" The nurse smiled softly, very much so. Relief washed through her, followed immediately by something heavier. Survival always brought questions with it. Days passed in fragments. Doctors came and went. The wound in her shoulder throbbed with a deep, grinding ache that no medication fully touched. Physical pain was manageable. It always had been. The waiting was worse. No one from the team came at first. She told herself it didn't matter. She was used to operating alone, used to being a footnote. Still, the absence pressed in on her chest at night when the ward grew quiet. On the fourth day, Kalen arrived. He stood in the doorway longer than necessary, like he wasn't sure he was allowed inside. His uniform was clean now. Too clean. The contrast made the memory of the valley feel unreal. "You look terrible," he said, trying and failing to smile. She typed with one hand, slow but steady. You should see the other guy. A laugh escaped him before he could stop it. It sounded strange in the sterile room, like something borrowed. He pulled a chair close, sat down, rested his forearms on his knees. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was different now, not dismissive, not awkward. Respectful. We reviewed the footage, he said finally. Weapon cams, drone feeds, everything. She watched his face carefully. We thought we knew what happened, he continued. Turns out we didn't know half of it. He met her eyes, held them. You weren't just reacting, you were leading. The word hit her unexpectedly. Leading. She looked away, throat tightening. She had never needed titles, never chased recognition. But being seen, truly seen, cracked something open she'd kept sealed for years. She typed again. I didn't have a choice. I know, Kalen said quietly. That's what scares me. He leaned back, exhaled. You saved 12 lives out there, possibly more. You also disobeyed direct orders about 6 times. She raised an eyebrow. He shook his head. They're calling it adaptive command under communications failure. A pause, which is a very polite way of saying you were right. Something like pride flickered through her chest. Subtle, unfamiliar, she let it stay. As Kalen stood to leave, he hesitated. For what it's worth, he added, no one's mocking the silence anymore. After he left, the room felt different, lighter, or maybe she was. Recovery was slow, brutally so. Physical therapy pushed her limits daily, reminding her how much she had lost: strength, speed, certainty. There were moments she wondered if the valley had taken too much this time, if her body would ever fully answer her commands again. At night, doubt crept in. What if that was it? What if the ridge was her last chapter? She dreamed of gunfire she couldn't answer, of warnings she couldn't give, of bullets falling uselessly into dirt while people walked past them into death. She woke soaked in sweat, heart racing, hands shaking. Hope didn't come all at once. It came in pieces. A message from Miller, awkwardly typed, thanking her for pulling his stupid ass out of the line of fire. A folded unit patch left on her bedside table with no note. A quiet visit from the medic who had worked on her in the valley, who simply nodded once deeply and said, "You did good." Weeks later, when she finally stood outside again, the sun felt too bright, the world too loud, but she stood anyway. She couldn't speak, but she could still act. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the scars and silence, something steady took root. Not an ending. Not yet. Why did returning to the range feel more terrifying than the valley ever had? The first time Lara stepped back onto gravel with a rifle in her hands, her legs betrayed her. Not enough to fall, just enough to remind her that confidence was no longer automatic. The range was quiet except for wind and distant steel. No explosions, no blood, no urgency. And yet her pulse raced like she was back on the ridge with one round left and nowhere to run. She adjusted the sling with her good hand. The shoulder that had taken the bullet protested immediately, a dull, stubborn pain that had become a permanent resident. The doctors called it progress. She called it memory. Behind her, a few figures stood at a respectful distance. Instructors, evaluators, people with clipboards and careful expressions. They tried not to stare, tried not to measure her by the rumors they'd already heard. Mute sniper, bullet orders saved a platoon. Stories had a way of growing teeth. She lay prone, breathing in dust and oil and sun-warmed earth, familiar, comforting. Her cheeks settled against the stock. For a moment, everything aligned the way it used to. Then her hand trembled. Just a little. She closed her eyes. The valley rushed back, the fuel cache, the mortar team, the moment before the trigger broke. Her breath hitched. The old fear crept in, whispering that maybe she had already used up whatever grace the world allowed her. She opened her eyes again. Don't rush, she told herself. You never rushed before. She fired. The round struck steel, clean and true. The sound echoed longer than it needed to. She fired again and again. Each shot steadied her. Each impact pushed the doubt a little farther away. The tremor faded. Her breathing slowed. By the time the magazine ran dry, she felt something she hadn't felt since before the hospital. Capability. Behind her, someone exhaled softly. Another made a note. She didn't turn around. The days that followed were harder. Not physically, though the pain never left, but emotionally. She was no longer invisible. People watched her now, measured her reactions, expected something extraordinary. She hated that more than being ignored. Extraordinary was pressure. Pressure cracked people. Instructors spoke to her slowly at first, like silence meant confusion. She corrected them with looks, gestures, clipped notes typed on her tablet. Some adapted quickly, others struggled. A few resented it. She recognized the signs. Pride bruised quietly. One afternoon, during a joint exercise briefing, a young officer questioned her placement on Overwatch. Without verbal comms, he said carefully, we're limiting flexibility. The room went still. Lara typed. Flexibility is knowing when to listen without sound. A beat. Then Kaylin spoke from the back of the room. She doesn't limit flexibility, she defines it. The officer flushed. The briefing moved on. Lara didn't look at Kaylin. She didn't need to. Trust, once broken, took time to rebuild. Trust, once earned, didn't need constant proof. The mission orders came 2 weeks later. Low visibility, high consequence, not combat-heavy, intelligence recovery, border-adjacent, politically sensitive. The kind of operation where mistakes didn't just cost lives, they cost meaning. When Lara read the assignment, her chest tightened. Not fear, responsibility. She was listed not as support, but as Overwatch lead. She stared at the words longer than necessary. Lead. The night before deployment, sleep refused to come. She sat on the edge of her bunk, tablet dark in her hands, listening to the bass settle around her. Boots in the distance. Laughter somewhere down the hall. Life continuing as if she hadn't almost lost hers. Doubt crept back in. What if the silence failed her this time? What if the team didn't follow? What if she froze? She closed her eyes and let the questions come, didn't fight them, didn't answer them. She had learned that fear didn't disappear when challenged. It faded when acknowledged. Morning came anyway. The insertion was clean, too clean. Lara took her position above a narrow pass, the terrain folding beneath her like a held breath. She scanned slowly, methodically, every movement deliberate. The team moved below, smaller now, lighter, different faces. No Miller this time, no familiar rhythms. Kaylin wasn't on this mission either. This was hers. The radio crackled softly, a check-in routine. She didn't respond. Instead, she fired. The shot struck stone ahead of the lead operator, stopping him mid-step. What the hell? Someone began. Then Lara fired again, closer, sharper. The team froze, weapons up, tension spiked. Before doubt could turn into anger, movement erupted from the pass, armed men spilling out of cover, caught mid-motion. The ambush died before it could breathe. Silence followed. Then a calm voice over the radio. Overwatch copy. Not a question. A statement. The rest of the mission unfolded like that, not smooth but clear. When Lara fired, the team adjusted. When she didn't, they moved. They learned her rhythm quickly, learned to read space instead of sound. By the time they extracted, no one questioned her methods. Back at base, there were no speeches, no ceremony, just quiet nods, easy eye contact, the kind that said, "We get it now." That night, Lara stood alone on the edge of the training field, watching the lights flicker on across the compound. She felt older than she was, stronger too, scarred in ways that didn't show up on scans. She thought about the valley, about the first shot she'd fired into the dirt instead of a man, about how much that decision had cost and saved. Kalen joined her without announcement. "You didn't hesitate," he said. She typed. "Neither did they." He smiled faintly. "You changed how people think out there." She looked at him, curious. "Not about silence," he clarified, "about leadership." The word felt different now, less heavy, less sharp. She typed one last line before turning away. "Leadership isn't volume, it's direction." As she walked back toward the barracks, the ache in her shoulder flared, a reminder that nothing was ever free. She welcomed it. Pain kept her honest. Somewhere behind her, a new team was learning how to listen without sound. And for the first time since losing her voice, Lara felt something settle into place. Not closure. Purpose. Why did the quiet finally feel like something she had chosen? The mission reports were finished, the after-action notes archived. Life, as it always did, tried to return to its old rhythm. But Lara noticed something subtle had changed, not in the world but in how the world met her. People waited now. Not awkwardly, not out of uncertainty, they waited with attention. In briefing rooms, conversations paused when she entered, not because she was invisible but because she was expected. When maps came up, eyes drifted toward her before anyone spoke. When decisions stalled, someone would glance at her hands, her tablet, the rifle case resting quietly at her feet. Silence had become a signal. She didn't let it harden into ego. She'd seen what that did to people. Ego made sound without substance. She kept her routines, morning conditioning, long hours on the range, even longer hours alone with terrain models and satellite feeds, relearning landscapes until they felt like extensions of her own body. Still, the nights were harder. Success had a way of loosening doors memory preferred to keep locked. Some evenings she dreamed of the valley again, but the dreams had shifted. The explosions were distant now, the fear softer. What remained were faces, men she had guided with bullets instead of words, men who had trusted the ground erupting in front of them more than the silence behind it. One night she woke and didn't reach for the tablet. She simply breathed. Weeks later a request came down the chain. Not an order, a request. A training cadre wanted her to observe, not instruct, just watch, learn what worked, what didn't, how teams adapted when sound was stripped away. She almost declined. Almost. The training site was stark and unforgiving, rocky elevation, unpredictable winds, minimal cover, perfect for learning. The teams rotated through scenarios, radios intentionally degraded, visual cues emphasized. At first, confusion ruled. Old habits died loudly. Then something interesting happened. They began to slow down. They looked up more, checked angles twice, waited for signs instead of instructions. When Lara fired warning shots into dirt or stone, they didn't flinch anymore. They read them. 1 round meant stop. 2 meant shift. No shot meant proceed. Language rebuilt from impact and trust. After 1 run, a young operator approached her, nervous, respectful. "How did you deal with it?" he asked. "The silence, I mean." Lara considered the question, longer than necessary. She typed carefully. "I stopped trying to replace it." He frowned slightly, then nodded. Understanding came quietly. That night she sat alone on a ridge overlooking the training grounds, stars sharp against a clear sky. The wind moved through scrub and stone, steady and patient. She rested her rifle across her knees not as a weapon, but as an anchor. She thought about the girl she had been before the blast, before the scar, before the world decided what she was now. She hadn't imagined this path, hadn't chosen it. But she had chosen how to walk it. Kalen joined her a few minutes later, lowering himself onto the rock beside her without ceremony. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. They watched the horizon together, comfortable in the shared quiet. After a while, he said, "They're writing a doctrine update." She glanced at him. "Non-verbal Overwatch coordination," he continued, "based largely on your field adaptations." She absorbed that slowly. Doctrine meant permanence. It meant her silence wouldn't be treated as an exception anymore, but as an option. She typed, "Make sure they don't forget why it works." Kalen nodded. "They won't, not this time." The wind shifted. Somewhere far off, a rifle cracked, training, controlled, purposeful. Lara felt no urge to join in. She was exactly where she needed to be. Before leaving, Kalen hesitated. "You know," he said, "there are people who will never understand it. They'll still think leadership has to sound a certain way." She typed without looking at him, "Let them be loud." He smiled at that. As she walked back down the ridge, her steps were slow but sure. The scar at her throat pulled slightly with each breath, a quiet reminder of what had been taken and what had been forged. She had learned something the valley never intended to teach her, something deeper than tactics or survival. That strength didn't always announce itself. That authority didn't need permission. That sometimes the most powerful voice in the room was the one that never spoke, because it didn't have to. The world would keep moving, missions would come and go, names would fade from reports. But somewhere on some dark ridge, a team would pause when the ground broke in front of them and live because they listened. And in that space between sound and action, Laura had found her redemption. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.